Hi, family. My name is Alex. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. Thank you, Kevin, for asking me to speak. Sorry, I just relocated upstairs because my husband is downstairs watching television and he's heard me speak about 7,000 times. And I think if anyone is sick of my story, it's him, if not myself, just a little bit. So, I normally prepare, like a topic or an idea or something, but I didn't really do that this time. I've been pretty busy at work the past couple of weeks, and it sort of consumed me the past 2 weeks. And so this morning I texted Kevin because I saw it on my calendar. It said speaking for Kevin, and I texted and I said, "Am I speaking for you tonight?" He said, "Oh crap, I forgot to send you the flyer." So I got the flyer and I was like, "Okay, I'm speaking." And then I sort of bummed around all day and didn't do much of anything, which was very much needed. And so here we are, at 8:09 East Coast time, and I'm super grateful to be on a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we'll see. We'll pray that God just sees my heart and guides my words. So that way I may be of service to somebody on this meeting tonight. And we'll let it roll. And so I picked up my first drink. I was about 12 or 13 years old. It came in the form of some skunk bud, and smoked that. And then my first drink was Jägermeister, and I drank that. And I immediately loved all of it. I liked the feeling of not having to live in the reality of my life. I immediately liked the feeling that there was a sense of ease and comfort, like the big book talks about, right? And the big book talks about two reasons why we drink: one, to overcome a craving, and two, because we like the effect produced by alcohol. And I think in my early days, I really drank because I liked the effect produced. When I was 9 years old, my father died of AIDS. When I was 11 years old, or 10 years old, actually, my mother remarried a pastor. So I had these really polar opposite lives when I was younger. I had this one life that was filled with, a father who was very physically and verbally abusive, who was an addict, and a mother who was very codependent. And so then I had this second sort of part of my childhood where it was filled with going to church every Sunday and, really having instilled in me this idea of heaven and hell, and God is the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And, this sort of very polar opposite sort of existence in my childhood. And so when I got to about the age of 13, 14, I really started to get to the edge and peer off into the abyss, and then learned how to pull myself back. And I like to do that because it allowed me to not have to deal with, like I said, the reality of my life, which was that I felt very different. I felt different from my friends. I felt different from my cousins. I felt different from the people around me. I was always comparing myself and comparing my life to other people. And I didn't really understand why I felt so different on the inside from the way other people looked like they felt on the outside. That was a very interesting thing at a young age to start to understand that there was something that was wrong with me. At least that's how I felt. And so, life in those early years progressed in a way in which, I was very defiant. Excuse me, my dog just knocked something off my desk. I apologize. I have a puppy and she's very annoying sometimes. So I didn't, so like I was very defiant. I was very like, if the button said don't press it, I was going to press it. I was very uninterested in your opinions. I was very uninterested in learning or, getting an education. I really wanted to do what I wanted to do with who I wanted to do it with. And I really just would throw up the middle finger and say F you to anybody who tried to tell me any differently. And so I lived that way for a while. Barely graduated high school. I don't think I did very well. I think I was pretty low in my class. Stopped playing sports, really stopped doing things that I guess kids do at a young age that kind of keep them on a straight and narrow path. And I sort of was I was the opposite. And, I was smoking weed before school. I was smoking weed after school. I was drinking on the weekends. I was in Saturday detention. And so I ended up going to a community college local, and took a summer semester and went and did school in Philadelphia. I think somebody mentioned they were in Philly at the beginning of the meeting. I lived in Philadelphia for a little while and went to a community college down there. And really, it was just another way for me to party. Really, it was just another way for me to get away from my family, get away from the truth, get away from the reality of my life, and go and try to have fun, because that's all I wanted to do. And so eventually from Philadelphia, I moved to New York, and whew, I had arrived. There was this sense as a young 20-something-year-old woman that um, the world was mine and that I could do whatever I wanted with it. And so what that looked like for me when I got to the city was, I drank, I used, had affairs with married men. I lied, I stole, I cheated. I had several jobs that I worked that was working as a cocktail waitress. I was working as an executive assistant at a finance firm on Wall Street. I was pursuing acting and going to theater classes. And, my life was really all over the place. It was very messy. And so I remember when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I would think to myself, like, I wasn't a day drinker. I wasn't a morning drinker. And the truth was I slept till 6 o'clock at night. So my first drink was 8 o'clock, but I just woken up at 6 o'clock, hadn't eaten anything all day. And then the first thing I would put in my body was another drink. And that was how I lived. I was about 90 pounds soaking wet, and I was running around the city and very, very unaware of my actions and the effect that my actions had on others. And so I had a couple of relationships that were tumultuous, one of which he was also an alcoholic. And I always like to share this story because I think what's cool is that he now has 13 years of sobriety. And he got sober and is in alcohol. He's a member of this fellowship. And so he and I got into a relationship together, and it was like two tornadoes meeting in the middle and like blowing up together. And so it was a lot of violence. There was a lot of fighting. I was oftentimes the aggressor. There was a lot of cops getting called on us in our apartment, Christmas trees smashed, a lot of that fun stuff that was interesting because that was what I saw in my home life, right? That was what I saw with my father when my father would be abusive to my mother. And so I was very much replicating that as a young woman. And so, we had a couple of times where, we went on these huge fights, and he would go out on a bender and I would go out on a bender, and we'd come back together, and, we would fight. And one time the cops got called, and I got handcuffed and put in the back of the cop car, and they were going to take me, they were going to lock me up for the night. And I was having a panic attack in the back of the cop car. And it was like the walls were closing in on me and my life was closing in on me, and nothing felt right. Nothing felt like I thought I wanted it to look like. And so they ended up taking me to the hospital. And I can remember, being strapped down. They strapped me down on the gurney and trying to rip my wrists out and trying to get out of the ambulance and trying to run away. And I was in my pajamas and flip-flops. And, I was a hot mess. And I can remember coming home from the hospital the next morning and sleeping for like 5 days and just feeling darkness, right? Like just that feeling of like, how has my life come to this? And I was looking around and I was seeing these other people that I had gone to high school with and gone to college with, and they were succeeding. They were getting married. They were having jobs. They were having, they had jobs. They were having kids. They were, there was some semblance of a successful life. And mine was like, I had $25 in my bank account. I hadn't paid rent in 3 months. I didn't pay taxes for about 7 years. I had the bank account that I did have, I had it levied by the IRS. So then I didn't trust banks. I had a lockbox filled with cash and other fun items. And that was how I lived, and I can remember like no furniture in my apartment, waking up in the morning, passed out on floor pillows. I had a dog at the time that would defecate all over the apartment because I was too drunk to get her outside to take her for a walk. I mean, I was incapable of living a life that was even worth living. So when I hear people talk about in AA, like I got my life back, like I don't think I got my life back because I don't think I had a life before I got here, right? Like AA has given me a life that is worth living today, but I didn't have a real life before then. And yeah, I had done some cool stuff and I had gone some cool places and I had traveled a little bit and whatever, but like it certainly was not the type of life where I was living free from the bondage of self. It certainly wasn't the type of life where I cared about what other people thought or felt or how my actions may have impacted them. It was not a life filled with caring about other people. It was very much a life about me, 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 me. And I don't know if you can identify with that, but I am selfish and self-centered to my core. It is the root of who I am. And thank God for this program, which has given me the tools needed and the grace of God to uproot that out of me so I can learn to live a different way. And so that boyfriend, so here's what's cool about that story. I left this part out. So that whole story about the domestic violence dispute where I ended up getting, taken to the hospital, he had thrown my drawers of clothes out the window. And at the time, there was a construction site in front of our apartment. And so what I did was I went downstairs and climbed the fence into the construction site with flip-flops and pajamas on and started to gather up all my stuff. And I was hysterically crying and I was drunk. And like I said, it was a couple-day bender. And I don't know what I was on or what I took or how much I had or whatever. But some girl walked by. And she walked by and she said, "Hey, do you need help?" And I remember I kind of told her, like, "No, I'm good. Thank you. Like, I'm all good here." Right. Meanwhile, I'm hysterically crying in a construction site in my pajamas. And she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, yeah. I mean, I've got this. And I told that story in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous 3 years into my sobriety. And a girl came up to me after the meeting and she said, "Oh my God, that was me. I remember you. I was the one who called the cops." And so that was the most powerful and profound thing that I was like, what? And it turns out she lived around the corner. She had lived there for like several years. She'd recently moved. She was back in town for the weekend. I just happened to be speaking at the 79th Street workshop in the city. And she heard me and she was like, "Oh my God, that was me." And so I just think that that's like the coolest thing ever, because that was the hand of AA reaching out for help. And I wasn't willing or ready to take it, because how different would the story have gone if I had said, "Yes, I need help." Right? It would have been a completely different story, but that wasn't the case, right? I said no. I sort of shooed her away, and I drank. I kept going, and that boyfriend ended up going to rehab. He went to a sober living. He came home. We lasted about 10 months. I, at that point, was in Al-Anon, was very much an untreated alcoholic living in Al-Anon. And eventually he moved out and he stayed sober and I kept going. I can remember feeling this sense of like, he left me, right? Like he's out there living his life and now he's this version of the guy that I always wanted him to be, but he wasn't with me. And the truth of the matter was that I wasn't the woman that he wanted to be with anymore, because I was still living that life, right? Nothing had changed for me. Everything was still the same. Even though I was going to Al-Anon, even though I was trying to read every self-help book that existed, I was traveling, I was, Deepak Chopra, A Course in Miracles, The Power of Now, you name it, I read it. And nothing seemed to work. I tried therapy, I tried yoga, nothing worked. And the truth of the matter is that I can't apply a spiritual solution to a problem that I haven't yet admitted. And that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to apply spiritual solutions to a problem I didn't know that I actually had. And so a couple years go by and I'm working at a yoga studio, and this girl I know who's sober, she also works at the studio, and she would say these crazy things to me like, "You don't have to drink tonight." And I'd be like, "What?" That just seemed like such a foreign concept. And she'd say, "Why don't you come to a meeting?" And I'd say, no. Like, I've tried that before. It doesn't work. It didn't work for me. It's not my thing, and blah, 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 blah. And so on and so forth like this for a couple months before eventually she invited me to a meeting. And I was just desperate enough that I said, "I'll go if I go with you." And so I went to a meeting with her, and that was my first time going to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, where I actually started to listen. And I sat in the rooms for about 2 weeks. I didn't raise my hand. I just listened. And I heard what you all had to say. And eventually one night there was a gentleman up at the podium who was from, I don't know, Staten Island, Long Island, Brooklyn, somewhere. And I didn't identify with anything that he said, other than the way that he thought, the way he felt, and the way he drank. And I raised my hand and I said, "Hi, my name is Alex and I'm an alcoholic, and today's day 1." And I started to count 90 meetings in 90 days, and I got a sponsor, and I threw myself into the fellowship. And I really began to attempt with all the fervor that I could muster to do this thing, And it was not easy. It was really hard. And there was a lot of challenging times. And, I still had a stash in my apartment that I ended up throwing away when I had like 36 days and I was really struggling. And, I picked up a guy in the program who had about a year sober, and got together with him, used him to keep me sober for the first couple months. I didn't do it the way they say to do it, right? Like this, right? Like, don't get involved in a relationship, go to 90 meetings in 90 days, blah, 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 like all the stuff we hear. I didn't do any of that. I did the 90 meetings in 90 days, but like, that was pretty much it. It was like game on. It was, I was still living in the defects of character and still living in my survival skills, because that's all I knew at the time. And when I got to that fifth step, I wasn't capable of being honest. I was still very much closed off and the wall was still very much up. But I was about 3.5 years sober when I was living in untreated alcoholism. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time until someone pointed it out to me. And I didn't have a sponsor. And a friend of mine, Melissa, she said, Alex, you really need to stop using the fellowship as your sponsor. And I was like, whoa, that's exactly what I'm doing. She was like, I really encourage you to find someone you can work with who you can be honest with. And so I go to a meeting and I'm running late. And I see a lot of faces on this meeting that I think are probably remember what it's like to have like your seat in the meeting. You know what I mean? Like, you get to the meeting early, you put your cup of coffee down, you put the paper down, you have your seat, and you make sure that you get your seat every time you go to your home group. Well, that was me. And I got to the meeting and I was late, and I wasn't in my seat, and I wasn't with my friends, and I wasn't on that side of the room, and I was sitting far away from everybody that I knew. And I was underneath the air conditioner, and it was loud and it was hot outside, and I was miserable. I was so miserable, and I was sober, and I was so unhappy with my life. And I remember sitting there thinking, why am I here? What am I doing here? Why? I didn't get sober to be miserable, right? And like, the truth is, I got sober to get the heat off my back. I wanted to get some money in my pocket. I wanted to figure out how to get a better job. Like, I just wanted to figure out how to get the external stuff. And I literally like leaned down to pick up my purse, and I'm like, I'm leaving this meeting. And immediately I heard a little voice that said, stay. And as soon as I heard the voice say stay, I was immediately arrested in my seat. And it was both a voice that sounded like my own and yet was not mine. And I turned my head and I started to listen to the speaker. And it was the first time I heard someone who had what I wanted. Because I always heard people say, find someone who has what you want. But how do you know what you want when you're early on? Right? Like, I don't know what I want. I don't even know what you have that I want. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, what did I want? I wanted the boyfriend. I wanted the job. I wanted the car. I wanted the better apartment. I wanted the purse and the clothes. I wanted to fit in with the shiny crew, and that was what I wanted. I didn't know that what was available to me through this process of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous was actually peace and ease, freedom and joy, happiness and kindness, compassion and love, right? Like, I didn't know that that was what was actually available to me. And then I heard this woman speak. And she spoke in such a way that I knew she not only had an experience with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I could feel her relationship to a power greater than herself speaking through her. And so I went up to her after the meeting and I asked her, I said, I don't have a sponsor. And I was crazy. I was nuts. I was like, I don't have a sponsor. I haven't had a sponsor in 8 months. Will you sponsor me? I need help, please. Like, blah, blah, blah. All the stuff's going on. And she said my favorite thing that anybody ever says in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is, call me tomorrow. Right. And so I called her the next day, and we spoke for like 45 minutes. And she was like, I'm going to find out, we're going to go through the book, and I'm going to find out if you're a real alcoholic. And my first thought was, well, maybe I'm not a real alcoholic. Aha, there's an out. And she started taking me through the work, and it turns out that not only am I an alcoholic, but I'm an addict as well. And that became my truth through that process of going through the 12 steps with her. So I'm an ENDA. I identify as an ENDA, right? I am an alcoholic ENDA. And so that was important for me, right? That was very important for me to come to understand in my relationship with my disease and my relationship with my higher power, because I needed to see that I was powerless in so many other areas of my life that I hadn't yet admitted. And so when I got to that fifth step, it was the first time someone asked me about my take it to the graves. And I had never heard that before. And I shared with her all those things that I shared with you at the beginning, right? The married men, the lying, the stealing, the cheating, the extent to which I did those things that I had never shared with anyone before. I shared them with her, and I share them with you now without any shame, without any guilt, without any, with full freedom from all of those behaviors, because I am no longer that woman today. I no longer live the way I lived back then. And so that was my understanding as I went through the work, was this ability to get really honest in a way in which I had never done before. And so, that was about 3.5 years into my sobriety. And next month, not next month, next month's October, November 18th, I will celebrate 10 years of continuous sobriety. And so for me, that process the way she took me through the work, we turned statements in the big book and from the big book into questions to have this sort of relatable experience to the work, changed my life profoundly. Like, I have had a profound alteration in the way I respond to life as a result of doing the steps with that woman. And though she is no longer my sponsor, every year on my sobriety date, I call her and I say thank you. And I tell her how much I love her and how much she helped to change my life. And so, I've switched sponsors since, and, I go to Al-Anon meetings, and I'm, going to be working the traditions hopefully very soon with my sponsor. And, I've started down a path that is beyond my wildest dreams, right? And if you had asked me what my wildest dreams were, I probably would say, I don't know, I live in LA, I hang out with Jennifer Aniston, I'm like a news anchor for some like E-entertainment. I live in the Hollywood Hills, and I'm friends with all the famous people, and, my boobs are bigger than they actually are, and I'm taller than I actually am, right? Like, these were my wildest dreams. And maybe on some level they might still be, but my wildest dreams today are the ability to live free. And I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like for me, because, the past 10 years have been, oh man, I mean, I've lost people to this disease, I've lost friends, I've lost family, I've lost people that I love, I've lost people that were perfect strangers to me, I've gotten fired from jobs, I've gotten hired, I've gotten promotions and raises, and I've made the most money I've ever made, and then I've gotten fired and had to get a job where I made the lowest amount of money that I've ever made. Like, there's been all these different experiences that have happened. Excuse me 1 second. Hey, stop it. Can you take her? Thank you. Sorry. So sorry. That was my little puppy wreaking havoc. But so I have had all of these things happen, and I've stayed sober. And more than just staying sober, I've been able to be free from the outcome and from the result of the thing that happens, right? So like, so here, I was raised Christian. I grew very far away from the Christian life that I was raised in. And I happened to fall in love with a man who is Jewish. I have since converted to Judaism. And while I am not a practicing good Jew, I certainly have done that experience, and by all accounts am now Jewish, and now have married a man who has 3 children, right? So I am 41 years old, and I have 3 stepchildren. I have no idea how to be a stepmother. I have no idea how to be a wife. I have no idea how to do any of these things, and yet God has given these things to me in my life and allows me to show up every day and love these children and love my husband and be of service, right? And learn how to be this woman that somehow God has sort of called me to be, I started a new job about a year ago. And at the same time that I was getting married and all of these things were happening, I started this new job. And by all accounts, it's a fantastic job and I love what I do. But some of the people that I work with rub up against my spirit. And I don't know if anybody here has ever had that interaction, but sometimes when you're trying to live a spiritual life and you encounter people who are not living a spiritual life, it becomes very difficult to interact with those types of people, right? There is an element of gossiping and pettiness and cattiness that occurs that, sometimes if I'm not careful, I can really get sucked into, right? And that's not how God would have me live today. So I need to learn how to be in this job and not be of this job, right? Learning to be in it, but not of it. And so, and I study a lot of spiritual literature. I mean, I read first of all, Pastor Stephen Furtick is one of my favorite pastors. He's a Christian pastor. I listen to him on Sundays. He's fantastic. I read a lot of literature that's, different spiritual practices and Buddhism and different philosophies and Judaism and all of these things, because I've learned that if I want to live spiritually, then I have to feed myself spiritually every day, right? And so this is how I start to learn to live free. Free from all these externals, because that person I was when I first came in here that thought I wanted all that stuff outside of me has slowly realized that it doesn't matter what I have that's outside of me. None of it will ever make me be okay on the inside. And so when you told me early on that it was an inside job, I didn't know that that's what you meant, right? And so what that kind of looks like is I have to find the ability to get quiet, even if that's I wake up late in the morning and then I get in the car and I've got a 45-minute drive into the city. Those 45 minutes, I'm quiet and I pray and I talk to God and I allow myself to just be in the car and experience the other people on the road and I make it a moving meditation, right? Or walking my dog, or going to the gym and walking on the treadmill and listening to a speaker tape. All of these things are acts that I do to draw me closer to God, right? Hitting my knees in the morning, saying the 3rd and the 7th step prayer, laying in bed at night, doing my inventory and asking God to take these defects of character, take the behaviors I find objectionable and remove them from me so that I may learn to be of service to my God and my fellows, right? Because that's my primary purpose. My primary purpose is to fit myself to be of maximum service to God and my fellows. And so these are the ways in which that I do those things. And I don't always know what it's going to look like. I don't know how God is going to use me. I don't know how God is going to say, okay, Alex, and this is my favorite, right? Maybe I walk into a Starbucks and I'm having a bad day and I'm mean to the girl at Starbucks. And maybe she's fed up. Maybe I'm the customer that she decides that's it. She's had enough and she quits her job and she goes back to school and she becomes a doctor and she studies cancer and she cures some kid of cancer. I don't know how my character defect is going to affect another person, right? I have no idea how God's going to use me to be of service to somebody else. Maybe that's a possibility. I don't know. Maybe me being rude that day is going to help somebody that's going to change their life, right? Or maybe it's going to teach me a lesson. Or maybe it's going to get removed that day, right? I don't know how God's going to use these things in me and through me to be of service to another person. And so that's how I learned to live free, right? This process is about, and I hear so many people talk about relief. It's not about relief. It's about freedom, right? Freedom from not just the bondage of alcohol and drugs and food and sex and money, but freedom from the story that I tell myself, freedom from the lie that I tell myself, which, by the way, is the scariest lie because it's the easiest one that I believe, right? Freedom from this idea of who I think you think I am. That's a big one for me. Who I think you, and that's where I'm struggling right now. These women at work, they seep into me and they rub me. It's like a Brillo pad against my spirit. And I get so, at the end of the day, I replay every conversation I have with them because it's well, what did I say? Was I okay? Did I not? And I've been seeing it more, literally on Wednesday night, I came home from work and I wept. I cried my eyes out. And my husband came and he sat on the couch with me and we talked through it and we talked and we talked and we talked. And I went to bed and I cried and I woke up the next morning and I prayed and I gave it to God. And I had a great day at work the next day. right? So like Wednesday was terrible. And then Thursday I gave it to God and I brought, I tapped into that power of my relationship with my higher power. And I brought that into my relationship with work and I had a beautiful day, right? Thursday and Friday were beautiful days. The first half of the week, not so much. It was rough. But at any moment, I have the ability to turn that thing around because there is a source that is available to me at any moment, And so, like, I struggle a lot with some of these areas, right? Like my finances, I still struggle with, right? I still think I can manage and control my money, right? I have to learn that God is my employer. I have to learn that there are certain things that I cannot live above my means, right? I'm learning how to bring God into my relationship with money. Learning how to be a wife at bringing God. I mean, when I tell you I'm the most selfish person I know, I am so selfish. My poor husband, like I have such a myopic view, he says, and I like blinders on sometimes. And I really have to learn that like right now, my decisions affect my husband. And when I make a decision, I have to consider how that's going to affect my relationship. That's new for me. Right. Like I'm used to making decisions based in self, which I can just do whatever I want to do and no one really cares. And now not only do I have a husband to consider, but I have 3 kids, right? And like they start their first day of school. I forget they start their first day of school. And David said, "Hey, did you reach out to the kids to ask them how their day was?" And I was like, shit, I totally forgot. Right. And what did I do? I picked up the phone. I reached out to them. I FaceTimed with my middle stepson. We had a great call. Like, all of these things, but like I'm learning how to do this stuff. I'm learning how to be free from selfishness and self-centeredness. And like I said before, the power of God really has the ability to root these things out of me. The big book talks about root and branch, right? Because it's like if I'm wilting away, you have to take me out and replant me into some fresh soil so I can grow new, right? And that's this process of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I'll share just in the last little bit that I have about 18 minutes. All this stuff that's happened over the years, the losses and the wins, if you will. The things that I've gotten a chance to learn from, the ability that I have to grow spiritually, the opportunity to be of service and to work with a lot of people. Those are the things that God's given me that I didn't know when I first came into these rooms was what this program was all about. I thought it was just about not drinking, right? When you said, don't drink, go to meetings, I was like, okay, cool, I can do that. But then when you started to say like, oh, you come for your drinking and you stay for your thinking, I didn't know what that meant. When I started to understand that there was something called emotional sobriety, I didn't understand what that meant, right? That it's not just a threefold disease. There's 4 parts to this thing. All that stuff that you told me early on that didn't quite make sense to me, because the truth is we don't really explain a lot of stuff to newcomers, right? Like we just kind of say these things. They're great slogans and they're up on the wall in the meetings and we say these things, but we don't really explain them so well sometimes. At least nobody did to me. And so I didn't know. I just didn't know what they meant. And now as I'm rounding into this 10th year of sobriety, I start to know what these things mean and I start to actually practice them and implement them in a way that is like tangible. A couple years ago, I made a graveside amends to my father. Not because I did anything wrong to my dad, right? He died when I was 9. I had nothing to do with his death, but the way I carried that through my life and the way it justified my drinking and the way it justified my behavior and the way it justified the way I treated you, worst of all, right? Like, so I had to go there and make a graveside amends. And in that process, I finally understood what it meant when you said, find a bigger God. Because I didn't know until that moment that the spirit of my dead father could now become a spirit of my higher power, right? And so that became the ability for me to find a bigger God, right? And so now when I pray to the Father, my big papa in the sky, as my friend Pat T likes to say, my big papa in the sky, I pray and that encompasses the spirit of my father who passed away when I was 9. And I'm free from that resentment. I'm free from that hold over me. I'm free from that feeling as though this loss has defined me my whole life, right? That's the freedom that's available to me as I go through this process. And that's the stuff that like all this difficult stuff that comes up, if I'm I found a lump in my breast about a year ago, and I went through that whole process, and just the stuff that comes up, and the life stuff that happens, right? Like, I can walk through it and none of it has to weigh me down anymore, right? Because my experience is uniquely qualified to be of service to another person. Two of my sponsees are on this meeting right now. I'm so happy to see their faces. And I just keep thinking about, like, how lucky am I that I get to walk this path shoulder to shoulder with other men and women and be on this journey. And, like, we don't have to do this thing alone, And that's the gift, right? That, like, I'm not alone today, right? That little girl who walked herself home from school. I can remember being 7 or 8 years old. I would walk in the middle of the street because I was so afraid that somebody was going to come out from the side and snatch me and take me away. I was so afraid of getting kidnapped as a kid. And I would walk down the middle of the street to get home. I was a latchkey kid. I'd let my kid in. I'd let myself in the house. I'd sit in front of the TV with Oreo cookies and I would turn the dial, right? I would turn the knob because that was the TV my grandmother had. And I would watch TV until someone came home from school. And I was alone. I was that kid who was alone. And today I'm no longer that person who feels so alone, right? Like, I have love and joy and happiness in my life. And this line in the big book where it says that we're happy, joyous, and free, I get to live that today and actually have that as a thing that's in my life. Happy, joyous, and free from alcohol, from drugs, from the story, from all the crap that was in my life before. And it's not perfect, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff I want that I don't have. There's a lot of stuff that, I think I need that maybe I really don't. These women at work who I think I need them to like me in order for me to be okay, like, maybe I actually don't. And I can just go in and do my job and be of service and go home and leave, and that's it, right? It doesn't have to be the way maybe a previous job was. All this stuff that I think is actually not what God would have it be, right? And if I trust my God, if I trust my higher power, that nothing happens in God's world by mistake, then I am perfect just right where I am, right? As Brene Brown says, I'm perfectly imperfect just where I am. And that's such a gift. And so, I don't have that much more to say, Kev. I know I'm a little bit early, but I didn't plan anything for this. I have no idea what was just shared. I hope I got to be of service to somebody. My story continues to evolve as I continue to grow, because for this thing for me, it's one day at a time for the rest of my life, right? Like, for me, that's the way I have to look at it, that this is a lifelong endeavor. My spiritual journey is a lifelong endeavor, and that I'm fortunate enough to have the grace of God in my life, that's what's been provided to me. And so, I don't know, like, do I think about drinking? Do I think about not drinking? Like, sometimes life is like getting punched in the face sober, right? Like, sometimes that's just the way my life can be. It's like I got punched in the face and I took it sober right on the chin. And I wake up tomorrow and I do it again, and people say all the time, like, I wouldn't trade I wouldn't trade my worst day sober for my best day drunk. And the truth is that I wouldn't trade anything for the world for what I have today, because the life that God has given me is beautiful. It's magical. It's unfolded in a way in which I never thought possible. The women that I have in my life, like Selena and Natalie and Kevin, and not that Kevin's a woman, but the people I have in my life, I don't know, maybe, but the people I have in my life, on this meeting and off this meeting are not just friends. They're not just fellows, they're family. And that's a gift that my family has gotten to grow through this program. And again, never thought any of this was possible when I first came into these rooms. And so I want to thank you for my life. I want to thank you for letting me speak. Kevin, I love you, brother. And I'm going to turn it back over to you.